Hello everyone. Long time no see, to be very honest. And yeah, I've been busy trying to get this right, to get more and deeper into research. And I've been reading. I've read about 4 research papers in the past. Last time I uploaded a video, and we're gonna cover two of them today because I wanna, make up for the time lost in a sense. And yeah, I have been trying to, stuff, apply to stuff for this summer, and there was that. So, let's get to it. Um, we're going to firstly start with something which is particularly new in terms of the area where we're going to try. This is Tab PFN. These are foundation models for tabular data. And the first paper, as you can see, for this came out on 16 September 2023. Surprisingly enough, the latest part came out about a month ago, which was Tab PFN 2.5. But regardless, let's get to it. We're gonna cover these very quickly, to be very honest. I've spent a lot of time reading, but yeah. Firstly, you need to understand the two parts, the three fundamental parts to a tabular foundation model. What does PFN stand for? PFN is a prior fitted network. What is a prior? A prior is like a generative algorithm that helps to create synthetic data sets and allows you to understand from it. Alright. But firstly, of course, you need to understand those priors. To give you a better understanding where this stuff works, you can consider this as an alternative for XGBoost or LightGBM in the cases of very deep and large data sets with tabular data, right? So where we are looking towards larger data sets with a lot of interdependencies which are very complex, we look towards these kind of data models. All right, so let's move forward. Of course, we're gonna start with understanding of the prior. Okay, so using a prior, we train the model to predict a PPD, a posterior predictive distribution. This PPD is exactly the space, as you can see over here. This prior defines the space of hypothesis. So the PPD exactly mimics real life data, and then we can create more accurate synthetic data. So in the case of Tab PFN, the basic thing we need to understand is they train on synthetic data, and that allows us for in-context learning afterwards. Okay, so I of course kind of assume for you to understand basic stuff on the basis of transformers and everything to get a better understanding. But yeah, basically this is all in this page in a sense. We have two types of synthetic data sets. One is for the training and one for the testing, and the Tab PFN calculates its training loss entirely using the synthetic data sets generated by its prior. So as you got from that sentence, the prior creates the synthetic data sets over which we then train. Right. Now these priors in itself have two parts over which they understand stuff. Okay. So we want to work with that now. Okay, let's get to the meaty stuff. Yep. So the priors itself have two parts, SCMs and BNNs. And SCM is a structural causal model, and a BNN is a Bayesian neural network. Now, what is the point for both of these? So an SCM basically, just a second, let me just flip some pages. Yep. So an SCM basically forms a graph, and each of the nodes is a variable and the edges are the causal links. So as you can understand, the SCM itself is like a directed acyclic graph that mimics features and mimics the relationships between features, and each of a vertex is or an edge is a causal link, and the nodes are the variables, right? And each variable depends on its parents and some noise, if you get what I mean, because each variable will of course depend on what it came from, and we do give it some real life ness by adding noise. So what are the steps in a sense? So the first step is to create a DAG, that is a directed acyclic graph. Then we define the functions between variables, like what depends on what and how, that how are the functions between those variables, and that is how the causal links or the edges are derived as well. And thirdly, we sample some noise and pass that through the graphs, and once we combine all of that, the answers or the values we get, that is basically one half of the prior itself. Okay, so as you got from this part is pretty deterministic because we now exactly know what comes from what. But to mimic the generalization, that's where the second part of the prior comes in, and that's where we go towards BNNs. A BNN is a Bayesian neural network. Now, an SCM is too biased, it assumes causal graphs, but a BNN is a random neural network in a sense because the weights of a BNN are in a distribution. Yeah, so exactly. The weights itself can vary between a particular limit. So that's why it creates a structured chaos in a sense that we want to induce in our prior for its understanding. Right. All of this is being done to create a very good prior that learns the PPD well enough to create realistic enough synthetic data over which we then train. Right. So yeah, there's completely just all of that in this case. In the bottom, we can also see the foundations over which, for example, if you take a class and what are the foundations for the distribution for the weights, as I told you before, and how we divide it. And of course, the experiments itself, there are two types of experiments that we are working towards. First is like the toy datasets, and that is from, if I'm not wrong, they are from standard classifiers, and these are the things we use. Here, XGBoost, KNNs, and CatBoost and Light GPM are used as basic benchmarks or like baselines over which we then compare the improvements in a sense, right? So the datasets itself, if we move towards this, we have 30 datasets that we work towards. These are the major experiments, right? And over here, we depends on the author itself, and yeah. I'm not sure what all I can explain over here. It's quite standard, to be honest. Like I told you, we're using 5 ML methods and 2 SOTA or auto ML systems for tabular data. And there are, sorry, my bad. And these are the ones that are used for the baseline, right? So let's move forward. The results itself, well, long story short, the results are that for small and medium datasets, the baselines work the best in the case of very simplistic and very direct relationships of a data. And in those cases, XGBoost, Light GPM are still the kings. But in the case of larger datasets where we require depth and we require very complex how can I explain this? Inter-causal relationships. In that case, we have TAP-PFN. So yeah, as you can see from the results section itself, the TAP-PFN makes better predictions within less than a second on one GPU and ties in performance with the auto ML systems. And these are the decision trees, the gradient boosted decision trees. And unsurprisingly, the simple baselines already yield results with a small but perform worse overall. And in the case of, on the flip side, they perform better but are still outperformed by TAP-PFN and like state-of-the-art systems. So yeah, I think this covers it in a very broad sense. But one of the drawbacks of TAP-PFN is it is very weak when it has missing values. Because creating those DAGs, we need the variables to act as a node. So if you have any sort of missing values, it just breaks to understand the causal links between. And one of the things that we can work towards for TAP-PFN is the ensembling, so that suppose we add TAP-PFN along with an AutoML system, it will of course perform much better. So yeah, there's that. That's about it for this paper. And let's move on to the next one. All Credit goes to these authors. And yeah, let's move on to the next one. This is for diffusion models and for using diffusion models for time series forecasting. Now, if you're aware, of course, time series is a very sensitive thing, because you need to take care of what came from what, and for mimicking that kind of data and for reconstructing it, usually nowadays diffusion models are being used, but you have to make sure to always understand what came from where, because diffusion models basically crumples everything and breaks everything and then creates from that and learns from that. So I'll just go and understand the major contributions of this paper. We have a summary for that over here as well, my bad. We have a summary for that over here as well, but I'll explain them in a very simple way. So firstly, if we look towards, let's just move forward, we understand what diffusion models are. And by all means, I had to read all of this as well to like completely understand and revise what diffusion models really are, because I was like completely blank in that, to be very honest. So yeah, to give you a very broad sense of the equations over here, this is the final noise to the Gaussian, this is the reconstruction term, and this over here is fixed, I believe, yes. So in the case of the learning of a diffusion model, only the backward process is learnable. The forward itself is unlearnable. It's fixed. It's fixed on how you break it, but you only learn while going back. And this is what this paper changes. It helps the system itself to now finally understand how to break it in a way that we understand where it comes from, if you get what I mean. Now, in the case of diffusion models, while we're going in the forward process, we apply a very standard noise, or a standard noise over the entire system. So instead of doing that, in this paper, we have actually employed a way where we have a structured noise, and now we know that on the basis of a learnable parameter. So we're just adding noise in a very systematic way, structured chaos, as I've told in the previous paper as well. And once we do that, there's one thing. Secondly, because of this paper's nature to be non-Markovian, right? Due to that, we now know what part came from where. For example, if I have a Lego set, okay, and I have to learn to create those Lego sets using diffusion models. Earlier, what I used to do, I used to just systematically break it, but then keep the broken pieces in a single pile. So I don't know what came from where. But in the case of time series data, you have to make sure that what came from where, so that you can actually mimic it and create those trends again, right? So for that, this time when we break it, we have kept the pieces into a systematic group, as we know. So for example, if I broke the ceiling of a house, all of the blocks that came from the ceiling are grouped together, and the ones that came from the floor are grouped together, the furniture is grouped together, but they're all still broken. So when we learn in the reverse process, it is comparatively much understanding for where came from what. So that's why now the forward process itself is also learnable compared to the normal case of a DDPM. Alright. And let's see what else. In terms of the maths itself, the equations are something you have to understand. I did understand them partly, but not up to the degree where I can reproduce them, to be very honest. So that's why I put this this paper as a secondary thing, to be honest. In the case of the experiment setups, they had 9 real world data spanning on different things such as wind, K-zone, traffic, electricity, exchange, ETT, and ETTM1. These are the energy reports. So yeah, we have the implementation details, and in terms of the results itself, the CNDiff, this is the method's name, is state of the art in the case of many of these data sets, but it all depends on what we are comparing on. The only thing that this this method lacks in is the wind data set. And yeah, in the case of ablation studies, we now of course see what happens if we go back to the original conditions where the forward process is not learnable, and of course it leads to a drop in performance. And yeah, um, broadly that's it, to be very honest. I mean, I just wanted to have a comeback video in a sense to actually do this thing quickly, to be honest, and cover two papers. So yeah, all credit goes to these authors, and catch you in the next one. Thank you very much.